Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the House Energy Committee to order. It is 11:03 a.m. Steve, will you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler.
Here.
Representatives Boyd. Here. Brown.
On leave.
Serrato.
On leave.
Davidson. Here. Donahue.
On leave.
Friel. Present. Hiral.
Here.
Inglis.
On leave.
McAndrew.
On leave.
Pielli. Here. Rusnuk.
On leave.
Steele.
On leave.
Venkat. Here. Chair Causer.
Here.
Representatives Armanini. Here. Barton. Here. Cook. Present. Ham.
He's joining us virtually.
Kale.
On leave.
Kephart.
Joining virtually.
Mahalik.
On leave.
Rapp.
On leave.
Stambaugh. Here. Warner.
On leave.
And Williams.
On leave.
Attendance is recorded. Proceed, Madam Chair.
I'm online.
Let it be noted that Rep. Williams has joined us online.
I believe joining us are Representative Williams, Representative Ham, and Representative Rusnok, all three online. And Representative Warner also joining us online. Thank you, Steve, and thank you to the members, testifiers, and guests for joining us today for a public hearing on House Bill 1260, printers number 1414, sponsored by Representative Siegel. At this moment, when electricity bills are soaring, I'm interested in having this committee investigate ways we can increase generation and help keep costs down for Pennsylvania families. We've seen tremendous growth in warehouse construction, especially in the northeast part of the state. And in many ways, warehouses are ideal places to build solar arrays. I look forward to hearing more about this legislation from the testifiers and from the bill's sponsor. Chairman Causer, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've heard a lot of questions and concerns about this bill, so I'm looking forward to the testimony that's going to be presented today, and I'm sure members are going to have questions, so look forward to the testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And Representative Siegel actually is unable to join us in person this morning due to something coming up, but he will be submitting his comments, so we have them for the record. With that said, today we have three testifiers: Rob Baer of the Pennsylvania Building and Construction Trades Council, Pat McDonnell of Penn Future, and Victoria Maroney of Forefront Power. Testifiers, thank you for waking up early and joining us here on a Monday morning. Please know that members already have your excellent written testimony in their packets, so as much as possible, please summarize it so that we can have time to ask you all some great questions at the end. We will hold all questions until after your testimony is complete. That said, today we will start with you, Mr. Baer. You may begin.
Well, thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to come in and talk to you this morning. Chair Cosler, Chair Fiedler. As you guys are all aware, everybody in this committee, I'm the energy guy for PA, and I am the all the above energy. Sometimes the chagrin of some of my other panelists here. You know, I like nuke, I like gas, I like coal, I like it all. But I also understand the need for the diversified portfolio. And solar absolutely should have a portion of this portfolio in Pennsylvania. And one of my jobs as president of the State Building Trades is I look at everything on macro levels also. And I've heard the concerns from Representative Armanini ruining forest in his area, putting solar in. I've heard the people yell about taking the farm ground. And as somebody that lives in a very rural area, you know, Representative Stambaugh and I are seeing this in Juniata and Perry County everywhere. We're getting ready to do what, 800 megawatt? Right. So I look and say, okay, I know we need it all in the portfolio, but what is something bipartisan that we can work together on that actually checks a couple boxes? And covering million-square-foot warehouses with solar panels is one of the easiest things we can do. It's a rapid deployment. They're all modular. The infrastructure is built into the project as we build the warehouse. And as long as the warehouse is built with a roof structure to carry it, we can deploy it rapidly, and it's low impact. It also allows our warehouse developers a revenue stream because they can rent that roof space. And as they build that warehouse and they're trying to get a full lease rate, what do they need? Well, they need some return on their investment. So they're going to lease that rooftop space. And so we're killing a lot of birds with one stone here, you know? And one of the things that I ask, and I'm sure Steve will move it, Friday when I was coming back from the nuclear summit with Representative Matzey, I asked Dr. Herzenberg from Keystone Research to pull us some additional info on how big these warehouses have gotten in PA over the last 20 years and where they're located. And you will see what I found interesting was the 81 corridor from New York to Maryland, the 78 corridor from Jersey to where it hits against 81. 45.4% of all warehouse space is in those counties. And when you add York and Lancaster counties in, that number goes to 54.4% of all warehousing in the state of Pennsylvania. So what's that tell us? We're building warehouses along the corridors. We're employing a lot of people in those jobs, but we have a lot of roof space just sitting there doing nothing. So we can put it to use. Now, Representative Stambaugh and I got a lot of work to do in Perry and Juniata County because we got 0%, which is a horrible market share. And we were right on 322. We can build out solar to help supplement our electrical generation needs. And I play long game. If I could build 3 gigawatts of solar out and I'm not costing the taxpayers money by doing it, I'm allowing local control with the bill. And as I've spoken to Representative Armanini, we can negotiate with those developers community benefit agreements also so that we can have money coming back into our communities. That's all on the table. And I'm looking at Chair Fiedler. You know how hard it was that we got a Solar for Schools bill done, but that was a bipartisan bill. It took 18 months. This is much the same thing. Look, I know there's going to be concerns. I know there's going to be amendments. But the reason this is important is we get this process started, we get this on the table, and we have some real discussions. Because as you guys have heard, nuclear is coming. We're utilizing gas in the short term. We know we need the energy, but we still have to have an all the above. And solar absolutely has a place in this market. And it's one of the easiest to also bring relief and return on investment for the developers, which at the end of the day, if this spurs more economic development for PA, that's what we want. So when you get everything from Keystone Research, and Dr. Herzenberg is an overachiever. I asked for 1 page, he sent 12, but you'll see it. And one of the other things to keep in mind is we are going to need some relief, not through the legislator, but at the PUC level also. All right, there is going to be some regulations, and the 2 esteemed colleagues with me will be able to speak better to what we need there, but we have billions of dollars that are ready to go for deployment. But as you know, the journey of 1,000,000 miles starts with the first step, and this is it. We need some injunctive relief from the PUC to get these projects going, and we're ready to deploy. And at the end of the day, there's a reason why we're looking at all the above energy policy. We know we can't shut power off. We know there's a need for it. We know we can't afford brownouts or blackouts. We also have to be cognizant that we want to save our ground in PA, right? I don't like seeing my farm ground covered either. I live in a very rural area. Do I want to look at 800 acres of a solar farm right beside my house? No. Do I have the right to tell the gentleman that owns the farm no? No, I don't. But if I can provide a logical option, which is what this bill starts to do, then we would be remiss if we didn't actually take a long, hard look at it. And when you look at Lebanon, Schuylkill, Lehigh, Northampton, Dauphin, Cumberland, all these counties that we have almost zero solar in to amount to anything, we have people that would like to put it on the roof, we have developers who would love to rent that roof space, and we have people that have the panels and the inverters sitting ready to go. Well, then we need to have a true hearing and say, can we find a compromise? Can we get this bill out of committee? Can we get a vote on it? Can we send it to the Senate? Now, I'm a realist. I know it's going to be probably till the end of the session, but this is where we start. And we're not picking winners and losers. This is a bill that says everybody gets a fair shot, and all the above policy stays in play. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. I want to note also joining us now is Representative Inglis in person, Representative Kephart online, both committee members, and thank you to Rep. Mahaffey for joining us in the audience as well. Next, we'll hear from our second testifier. Mr. McDonald, would you please begin?
Absolutely. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer. Good to see you all again. Again, I'll summarize as you all have the testimony. And really, the two things I think we are focused on as we think about this are, one, as was said, the lack of solar that we currently have in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That has led to an impact on cost, that has led to an impact on the bills that we all in this room and your constituents pay on a daily, monthly basis. In PJM last year, we saw our auction price surge, whereas it was previously just under $29. It is now just under $280, and that is led to an increase of about 15% on the average Pennsylvanian's electricity bill. A lot of that increase was driven by the fact that as we came out of Winter Storm Elliott in 2022, PJM did some reevaluation of just how reliable the gas plants in fact were, because they had failed during that emergency, which again increased the capacity cost that we all are ultimately paying for on our electric bill. Today, gas is providing about 60% of Pennsylvania's electricity. We see less than 5% coming from renewable forms of energy. And diversification of the portfolio is critical in order for us to drive down those prices. This legislation aims to establish new standards for construction of warehouses to ensure we're not losing an opportunity in the build out of these warehouses across the Commonwealth to utilize them as a source of electricity going forward. It provides an opportunity and a benefit to surrounding communities to be able to realize some electricity savings on their bill by generation on the distribution grid. These warehouses, and the need for this legislation is clear. The warehouses are typically constructed with flat roofs, designed to make sure they can handle the load of snowfall, but nothing more. And I can speak from personal experience. I actually have solar on my own home. And when they installed those panels, one of the things they had to do was an engineering study of my attic, and it turned out I needed some additional buttressing in that attic in order for me to have solar on my rooftop. So we know that the engineering of these things is important. The last thing I just want to point out is as we talk about energy and energy costs, we can see in other states the success that they are having in using renewable energy. Texas in particular now leads the nation in solar development, in wind development, in battery development recently, has surpassed California. They're also one of the few places where we have seen their costs go down, where their consumers are seeing reduced energy bills as opposed to increasing energy bills. We see build out of solar in Florida. We see build out of solar or of wind across the Midwest. So the time to use renewable energy, which is the cheapest form of electricity we can put on the grid, is now. And we want to make sure that we are putting policies in place where we aren't losing an opportunity as we're putting a lot of impervious surface on the land to take advantage of what should be an obvious opportunity to deal with energy and the climate. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Ms. Maroney?
Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to present testimony today in support of HB 1260, the Solar Ready Warehouse and Distribution Center Act. My name is Victoria Maroney. I'm Director of Market Development at Forefront Power. We are a distributed solar and storage developer, owner, and operator. We are developing, owning, and operating projects across the United States and Mexico. And I'm grateful to be here today to talk about the experience of being a commercial rooftop developer. We have a long history of this kind of development with hundreds of megawatts developed since our inception. So we have a lot of experience in understanding what does and doesn't work when it comes to developing these kinds of projects. Commercial rooftop solar is a great example of environmentally beneficial land use, environmentally beneficial siting, and generating electricity close to demand. This is great for ratepayers because it means we're avoiding the build out of the transmission and distribution system, which is the part of the system where costs have been rising the fastest. So any way we can reduce that build out of the system is beneficial to Pennsylvania ratepayers. These projects can also come online more quickly since they have faster permitting and development timelines, which is something we urgently need right now with the PJM capacity crisis. These create good family-sustaining jobs. So what is preventing every warehouse, distribution center, or large commercial rooftop from having solar? Isn't this a no-brainer? While the benefits are compelling, the reality is that finding a warehouse or distribution center that is solar ready can be challenging. Several factors go into determining whether any individual facility is solar ready. First, the roof can't be overly encumbered by HVAC systems, sunlights, or vents. The roof structure itself must have sufficient loading capacity to support the weight of the system. And third, there needs to be clear access to plug the project into the grid, whether that's behind the customer's meter in their electrical room or in front of the customer's meter right into the distribution system. And finally, the building owner has to understand and be excited about the financial benefits of solar, whether that's because they're going to be saving money on their electric bill every month or because they're going to be getting an additional revenue stream from leasing that rooftop space. In many cases, warehouses don't have that much electric demand themselves. And so oftentimes the size of their roof is actually the size of the system that they would need to build to consume their entire electric demand is smaller than their entire roof space, leading to underutilized roofs. This is where programs like virtual net metering can come in handy because it means that other members of the community, businesses, can actually subscribe to a portion of that roof, helping make sure that we're fully utilizing the roof space available on these facilities. So when you take all these factors into consideration, it's understandable that finding these large-scale rooftops that tick all of these boxes is more challenging than you would initially expect. It's not that any of these requirements are overly cumbersome or expensive. It's just that warehouse developers don't have this in mind when they're developing their facilities, and that's completely understandable. They have a lot of other things to think about. But without clear standards and guidelines, many of these buildings end up not being suitable for solar. However, there are numerous distribution centers, warehouses that are already good sites for solar because they naturally incorporate common design elements that make them solar ready. The existence of these buildings proves that the components of a solar ready structure are often standard design features, readily achievable without significant additional cost. That's why we're supportive of common sense legislation like HB 1260 that sets clear standards for making large-scale warehouses and distribution centers solar ready. The best time to make these facilities solar ready is when they're being designed and constructed. Thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Ms. Maroney. Thank you to all of our testifiers. We will jump right into the question and answer, and I appreciate very much you all making sure that we have time. Our members have a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we do have time for that. I'll kick it off with one question, and this question is for either Mr. Bear or Ms. Maroney. It was mentioned that we should not miss out on this as an opportunity. I know a similar bill passed across the river in New Jersey, and it really caught my attention that the Commercial Real Estate Development Association supported it, which might be surprising given that it means additional work is necessary. So we dug into it, and the Trade Association for Commercial Developers in New Jersey explained that, in fact, warehouses with solar-ready roofs are easier to lease than those that lack solar preparation. and this is part of the reason they supported it. They also supported it because it actually doesn't cost that much more to make a warehouse solar ready. We got some numbers from one company, Fenton Construction, which has been around for 60 years, and they said that it would cost less than 1%. They told us that the cost of designing a 50,000 square foot pre-engineered steel building, it would cost less than 1% additional to make it solar ready. So I just wanted either Ms. Maroney or Mr. Baer to tell us, is that right? Are we talking about something that's relatively small like that when we're looking at the additional cost and work to be able to make one of these buildings solar ready so we don't miss out on that opportunity?
They are correct. When you incorporate it into the design of the building, it comes down to really, and I've built million square foot warehouses, it's the size of the columns and the bar joists and how much roof deflection you put in. And being as a building in the Northeast, we already build for snow loads. So it's really not that much more to amp it up. And what's funny is somebody that's built them in the monitoring system is something very simple too. It's a laser and a mirror. And you put a laser on one side of your building and you shoot it and bounce it off a mirror and you set it underneath the deflection of your bar joist. And when the bar joist deflects enough due to snow load or whatever, it sets an alarm off and you go up and shovel your roof. So it's really, it's that simple. I know it's crazy, isn't it? To keep it simple method. But yeah, we can build them in. And when the trade association also sees the value of it, because you know what they want to do? They want to lease their roof space, right? It's a positive ROI for them. So, you know, I'm a big fan of overbuilding. You know, somebody that's also came from the nuclear industry, we build 5, 6, 7, 8 times safety factors in. We don't really need that even on the warehouse, but let's do it early on. On a million square foot warehouse, it might be a little more than 1%, I would say, yeah. But at the end of the day, if he can lease that roof space for 30 years, I think he's going to be more than willing to incorporate that into the design.
The only thing I would add, I agree with everything that Rob said. The only thing I would add is that we're seeing tech companies, large tech companies that are incredibly cost conscious start to incorporate solar ready design into their new warehouses across the country. I think these companies would not be making that decision if there was not a positive ROI on that investment.
Thank you both for your answers. Chairman Causer?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the testimony from our testifiers. You know, Mr. Baer, when you talk about an all-of-the-above energy strategy, you and I have had several conversations, and I certainly agree with an all-of-the-above energy strategy. When we're looking at different forms of energy, we're often talking about incentives when it comes to different sources, such as tax credits, things of that nature. And then we have energy sources that don't ask for anything other than to be left alone, like natural gas. That is not looking for some kind of incentive. And then with this proposal, we're actually talking about a mandate. We're requiring, should this become law, a mandate that these warehouses be solar ready. And that's sort of a new level of government involvement because this is private property. What if the owner doesn't want to be solar ready? Isn't that their right to not be solar ready? I mean, so let's flesh this out a little bit more rather than just constantly saying it's a no-brainer. Let's talk about, this is a mandate.
Well,
you would be sending DEP after these folks
as I
should
said,
they
Chairman
not be
Causer,
solar ready.
This is a first step, and I fully expect we're going to have some conversation and amendments going forward. And as you know, and you and I have talked, just like I said, how do you tell a farmer that owns 800 acres, he can't cover it with solar panels, right? So there's no magic bullet, and I don't disagree that this is going to have to be flushed out. I think maybe what there could be was an incentive in there for people to want to overbuild if they want to do that. I agree. Look, I don't like the government in my business. I'm a Juniata Countyan, okay? I'm about as hillbilly as it gets. But I also understand that with our grid need, solar is the most rapidly deployable excess energy we can put on right now. If I go to build you a gas-fired turbine, if I order a turbine today, I'm 3 years out till I get a turbine. That's a fact. I know that if I'm going to do a baseload nuke, I'm 2030 till Westinghouse is ready for the AP1000s, and we're hoping that GE and Mitsubishi are ready in 2030 for SMRs. And I know that we're going to build gas. We're doing Homer City. We're going to do Bruce Mansfield, but we still have a time frame. So all I say is, as an all-the-above energy guy, this is a rapidly deployable one that I can get to the grid to help ease the shortage. It's not going to be a magic bullet, but I'm also the realist saying, okay, let's talk about this. I understand your concerns. I also say if we have people that want to do it, if we do want to incentivize it a little bit, and we can bring power to the grid rapidly and help offset the shortage, I think we should really at least have that discussion.
And I understand your perspective. It's just when you're going down the road of mandating in the construction of a building, it's a significant concern when we're mandating certain, improvements to a structure, because as I said, this is private property, and then you have to look at the competitiveness. Maybe states like Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland are not going to do this, and then developer will go to another state rather than come to our state. So I mean that competitiveness has to enter the conversation.
It absolutely does. I think one of the things that makes Pennsylvania uniquely positioned to do this, and I had Dr. Herzenberg do a study for me on why we saw this massive amount of warehouse boom in Pennsylvania the last 20 years. And what was interesting was when you plug a pin in Harrisburg and you go 6 hours east, 6 hours west, 6 hours north, 6 hours south, we've touched 62% of the population in the United States, and we have the best infrastructure as our highway system. So they're going to continue to build here. That is a reality, and they're going to want to use Pennsylvania. That's also why my guys built 3 giant rail unloading aprons for CNX, because the goods are coming here and they're being distributed throughout PA. So I just think we should really take a look and say, okay, if we're going to build, and look, I agree with you, Chairman Causer. I don't always like overregulation either. But I also sometimes look at it and go, there are safety factors that we have to put into a building. If we can incentivize our developers to overbuild, not mandate, overbuild, I'd be okay with that. I'm open to working with everybody. I just think that this is an opportunity to get some additional generation onto the grid rapidly. How we get there, I look forward to you and I having these discussions, because I think you and I have said many times, and even though we don't always agree on the path, we kind of agree on the end point. And I think somewhere in this, we can find common ground.
We better look at the language a little closer. But thank you very much.
Well,
thank you.
I always say, what's on paper first isn't where we're going to end up.
I understand. Definitely. I appreciate your testimony. I know other members have questions. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think with energy prices going up, we really have to do everything we can to make sure we're emphasizing the all of the above. When I go back home, that is one of the things I hear most often about is the utility bills. I just want to ask a real quick follow-up question, and then I promise we will get to members' questions. Based on something Chairman Causer said, Mr. McDonald, since a similar legislation came into being in New Jersey in November of 2021, have warehouses ceased to be cited there? Have they fled in large numbers? Is there, and I ask this as a serious question because I think that's part of our job as state lawmakers, is to look at what's happening in other states and be able to anticipate as best we can the impact of the legislation.
Yeah, I don't have statistics, but no. And in fact, one of the things that we are seeing, and it is interesting that the Center for Rural Development studied what's going on with warehouses and the things that surround that. And one of the things which may seem counterintuitive that they've seen is the amount of accidents involving semi-trucks and tractor trailers has gone down. The reason for that is because we're now much, much more reliant on box trucks, which we have seen those accidents go up. So to the point of a warehouse that might be built, say, in the Lehigh Valley on 78, that is not going to go to Ohio because of physics, right? Because of the roadways. So we are going to see these things built. I always point out we're the Keystone State. There's a reason for that. for that moniker. It's because it's very hard to get into the Northeast or to the, from the Northeast to the South or out West without coming through Pennsylvania, which is why we're continuing to see this development. It's important to manage that development well, but we're continuing to see the development in the Mid-Atlantic.
Thank you. For the first member question, we'll go to Representative Venkat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the testifiers. And it was good to see you last week at the Nuclear Summit as well, Mr. Baer. My question is about power purchase agreements. There are a number of entities in my district that are using power purchasing agreements in order to front the upfront cost for solar and then be able to receive the energy in a contracted way. How do you envision this legislation interacting with that in terms of readiness of warehouses and tenants who might want to use power purchase agreements? Is the legislation necessary in order to have more of that, or do you see something that might be a barrier here?
I'm happy to take that. So power purchase agreements are a great way to, for the customer to not do any capital expenditures upfront on their own. The developer and owner of the system takes care of all the financing for the project. We take care of utilizing any tax credits that might be available to the project. We then take care of all the operations and costs of maintaining the system. And in exchange, they get a power purchase agreement where they're paying a set amount for their energy and they can have certainty on their energy costs. So it's a really great structure. I think what this bill would do is increase the utilization of that kind of structure in Pennsylvania. So either the owners or tenants of the warehouses where these kinds of projects could be built could sign on to power purchase agreements. It's easier for those PPAs to happen because the building is solar ready. It also means it's less expensive for those power purchase agreements to happen. So yes, I think this would facilitate an expansion in that structure.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Armanini.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler, and thank you all for your comments. Just a few questions here. Reading through here, where you're stating the natural gas is the reason why prices are increasing. I find that to differ. If you check with PUC's information, the generation of natural gas has actually went down about 16% since 2011. And where we're really seeing our costs in our electric bills is if we go to the AEPS mandates that have been placed, which basically is saying that you have to generate your electricity from a certain amount from renewables that have went up 600%. So first, let's make sure we keep everything on the right track. And the reason for this is not because of the increase that it takes to generate natural gas, because that's not a fact, and that should not be present in comments. The thing that we have to look forward is, as Mr. Baer said, we do need a combination of everything. And you've also stated that before we're even going to be able to make a significant movement in supplying the energy we need in Pennsylvania, we're looking 3, 5, possibly more years. We're already behind the ball. We hear of Ohio, who's just placed 12 new natural gas energy generating facilities, 9,500 megawatts. None of this 300, 600 megawatts, 9,500. So they're ready for the AI. They're ready for the transmissions for the data centers and so forth. We're not. So this is all good, but I don't believe that we should be putting mandates on any company on any type of building that they want to build in Pennsylvania. I was in the manufacturing job. If you told me I had to make my building ready for solar, I would do that if I found that financially feasible to do. So that's the thing that we have to remember. That will occur on top of these buildings if it's financially feasible for that company to put that solar on. So, moving forward, we better make sure that we do not push our last coal-fired plants in Pennsylvania and this decommissioner, because we're going to put ourselves in a bad way if we continue to go down that road. So nuclear, yes, there's a bright future in all these different energies, but we better not take away what is keeping the lights on today. And the information, Mrs. Mowry, I'm always wondering, I can never get this. I would really love to see all your solar projects. What is your true efficiency? What is your percentage of electric you're generating throughout the year? Because we know you're not generating anything once the sun goes down. And we know the sun does not shine in Pennsylvania 365 days of the year. So I would be really interested to see what is solar actually doing that we're pushing. Are you making the energy that you stated you would initially? And I find it ironic that I could never find that. And, you mentioned, with the Storm Elliott, with natural gas felling, I don't think solar would have saved us in that storm either. Because if we're getting a significant storm, that means snow's coming down, it's cloudy, and I don't think the sun is producing very much. So those are just my comments. I mean, like you said, there's a lot that needs to be done with this bill, and we do have to move forward in Pennsylvania to make sure energy is accessible and reliable. But I don't think we should cut short what has gotten us here and what can continue to keep us here too. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Armanini. Ms. Maroney, I do want to give you a chance to answer the question that the representative has not gotten an answer to in the past. I also want to ask Mr. McDonald, I think that, if I was correct, I think the reference that you were making to the role of natural gas was in his testimony. So if that's okay, I'd like to give him a chance to respond as well so you could get a complete answer. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Maroney.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So you're right, the sun is not always shining. We have higher production in the summer than we do in the winter. But the good news is that predicting the patterns of solar electricity production is very easy. So we actually know, we can model fully what we expect the systems to be producing. And I can't speak for other companies, but Forefront Power has an excellent track record of producing exactly what we committed to for our customers with power purchase agreements or overproducing. So all of this is in the context of an all of the above portfolio. This is exactly what system planners are used to planning on. So they also are able to understand when we're going to be producing, when we're not going to be producing. The thing I would say is we've all seen how warm summers are getting. And if you look at what happened this last summer, PJM had record levels of demand and there were no brownouts, significant brownouts or blackouts in the system. Solar performs during those peak times incredibly well in that 4 to 7 p.m. time range in the summer. So there is a very clear use case and purpose for solar performing when the system needs it the most. And, again, we can model all of those expected production levels throughout the year.
Thank you very much. And just very quickly, one on the Winter Storm Elliott point. What happened coming out of Winter Storm Elliott was PJM had made an assumption about the ability of natural gas to perform that proved not accurate. It proved to fail in real time, and it was shown to be unreliable in those conditions. So what PJM did was say, we can rely on you less. We're going to reduce the amount of capacity we can count on, kind of exactly the question you're asking about solar. And that means we now have to procure more and more expensive sources of electricity, which is one of the big drivers in the costs that we are now seeing in the capacity market. On the and forgetting the second piece of that, the solar itself and its performance, as was just said, intermittency does not equal unreliability. When we're able to track these things and know when we're going to see solar production across the Commonwealth. So we know what to expect. And again, PJM is accounting for that in the decisions that we are making. Our organization is certainly not suggesting there's some switch that will get thrown that will mean we go from the existing grid to 100% renewable. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on the grid. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the background to get to that point. But as I said, we're now seeing in Texas, 34% of their electricity comes from renewable energy. 34%. And their costs are going down. Ours are not.
Well, thank you for that. And of course, the weather is a lot different in Texas than it is in Pennsylvania. And how you mentioned, you know, they said we can't rely on natural gas. Maybe one of the factors is because this Commonwealth has not let new natural gas distribution centers be built, and we're relying on what we had, and we are forced with an increase. So I think that problem goes back to the Wolf administration and just killing the natural gas industry. If we'd have left that industry grow, we would not be in any situation right now. And we put ourselves in this because of, I believe, very bad decisions in the past in dealing with natural gas. So thank you again.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we have Representative Friel.
Thank you guys very much for coming here today. Full disclosure, I'm a fan of nuclear, and I'm hoping that's probably the biggest increases that we can do in the future. However, I'll say, you know, as we're not building as much energy production, whether it be gas or solar or renewables or base load, I do think we need a path forward in all the above, right? And so I'm supportive of this concept, but I do have some questions. You know, I think we are in a market where if, you know, you're mandated to purchase a certain amount of energy, but we're not then improving those energies, then you're sort of artificially, you know, creating a situation where you're going to raise prices, right? Because the market's not working. I'm a capitalist. I'm a market guy. So I believe if you have a free market and you allow that market to work, you will see prices come down. And part of that is approval of projects, right? Whether it be gas, whether it be solar, whether it be nuclear, we need to see that we have a way to make the demand without putting our thumb on the scale to, you know, pick and choose winners, right? So I would think I am all of the above. With that said, and I'll just say this too, as we build out building standards, every single building code is a mandate. Whether it's a sprinkler system, an exit sign, a braille sign, it's all saying there's some public policy good that goes into that building code that benefits us as a society, whether it be safety, whether it be access, whether it be protecting our community from on the environmental concerns and stormwater management. So I think it's not out of line to have a building code to say it must be able to do this public good. But I do agree with my colleague on the other side that I think there has to be an ROI for the builders and developers. So my concern is, or now we want to see is if you could speak to, I build this solar on my 1 million square foot warehouse. What guarantees do I have that I can sell that onto the grid, that intermittent can be purchased? And what do we need to do in addition to this bill to make sure PJM and the market is there for these developers to get an ROI? Because I don't think it's fair to increase cost but not guarantee I have a market there in place. So if you could speak to that.
Thank you for the question. So I think the one thing I would want to emphasize is this is saying that the rooftop has to be solar ready, and then it's not going to be on the warehouse developer to go and develop the solar project. They can then go and partner with a solar developer who can take care of the process of figuring out what is the best way for us to put a solar facility on your system and monetize it in a way that benefits you. So that can be a couple different options. One, if they have sufficient electricity demand where, you know, their entire rooftop can be covered and be fully consumed by their own demand, then that's great. You can create a power purchase agreement where they're paying a guaranteed amount on their energy, they're getting savings on the bill, they have certainty, then there's ROI there, right? but maybe they don't have sufficient electricity demand to merit that kind of a structure. A lot of these warehouses, there actually isn't a lot of consumption that's happening, in which case programs like virtual net metering and the expansion of those can really help, because it means that businesses or homeowners in the area who do have electricity consumption can sign on to take a portion of that output and get the savings on their bill. So I think a lot of this is about creating options for developers to monetize their rooftops. Right now, that PPA structure that I talked about in Pennsylvania is an option fully available to warehouse developers. So that exists. The leasing option, where they lease their rooftop and the consumption gets consumed by local businesses, homeowners, that option is much trickier. It doesn't exactly exist in Pennsylvania right now. So creating programs that enable options for these developers is going to be really important, because no warehouse is the same.
Thank you for that. And I would just, as a follow-up, and you don't have to follow up here, but I would just say those other options that expand the market for developers and for those is a really important part of making this a success. Because if it's too narrow, then and you don't have that guaranteed ROI, right? I think that's the companion legislation needed.
The question about PJM, let's leave that for another day, because that would be another 3-hour hearing of where we are with PJM right now. And I know everybody in this room probably has certain feelings, and I'm going to keep mine quiet right now. But I just think that this is a really good way to get another energy source quickly to the grid. That's really what this is about. We know that solar for warehouses is not going to fix the baseload problems. All right, and you've heard me sit here and say, I love gas. I do. I love nuclear. There's a reason why I was out with Representative Venkat Friday in Pittsburgh. All right, you want carbon-free baseload generation 24/7, 365? Let's split atoms, right? It's there. But we also know that we're going to have a rapid need, and this backfills that for us. And one thing I would like to go back to Representative Armanetti. Look, you will hear 25 different competing opinions on how much solar actually produces. And when you break it down between a tilt track trace or a static system on a rooftop, it's all over the map. But what I can tell you, as somebody has installed it, is depending on the system, yeah, we can forecast with about probably a 90% accuracy of what we're going to get based off of historical weather conditions in PA. And it is nothing more than a way to say to PJM, we won't overpromise and we won't underdeliver. All right? It's never going to be a perfect system. You and I can't sit here and say, if we get a true nor'easter and we get 3 foot of snow, okay, we're probably going to lose a couple of days. But this is just another way to get a rapid deployment of another energy source to help backstop what we're losing. And when you hit on what Ohio built out, let's talk about that. That's 9.5 gigawatts. That's a lot. But guess what that 9.5 doesn't do? Ohio's part of PJM, and that doesn't backstop the losses we still have coming. That's how big the need is on PJM. So, I look forward to working with you guys, trying to get this bill done, strictly as a way to get some more electrons to the grid rapidly. And to Chair Causer's point, maybe we can get the developers to see the ROI on this and get in on this. And to Representative Field's point, and I think, Mike, you touched on it, AEPS. A lot of the AEPS that we're buying is not generated here in Pennsylvania. I'm not building it. It's not being used in the Commonwealth. The more we build out, the more we can buy from ourselves, which also helps bring the price down. And as you guys know, I want to build everything. I don't care if it's an outhouse or a nuke. The building trades wants to build it, and we want to build it in PA. And this is another way for us to maybe fix that problem that you and I have discussed a lot also. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go next to Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler. And thank you all for coming and your testimony. And Ms. Maroney and Mr. Blair, I have questions for you. So, Ms. Maroney, it might be more of a statement. Part of your testimony was that developers aren't thinking about this. I come from the energy world. I come from the development world as well. And so I'm here to tell you they do. They think about any opportunity to make an ROI per Rep. Friel's comments as well. And I think also in your testimony, not I think, in your testimonies, what's preventing every warehouse, distribution center, and large commercial rooftop from having solar? Isn't it a no-brainer? I guess my question is, well, if it is a no-brainer, why aren't they doing it now? If it's such a no-brainer, why aren't we doing it now? And are we suggesting that the government's smarter than developers, stakeholders, the people that have the boots on the ground? The reason they're not doing it is because the economics don't work. Or the reason they are doing it is because they believe the economics do work. And in some cases, maybe that's a risk. But that's up to the developer. And Mr. Baer, I'll just piggy on that, back on that, to some of your comments also, specific to the farm next to you. I don't know if that was hypothetical or not, but in your testimony, you mentioned a farm. You can't tell that farm what to do. You can't tell him that he can't put solar there. But we're telling them that instead of the solar on that farm, if they choose to put a warehouse, you're telling them they have to put solar, design that warehouse so that solar can be put on that warehouse. So what's the difference there? Why are we telling someone you can't do this with your property, but you have to do this with your property? I just think that's contradictory.
Well, and as I said, this is just the first step. I would fully expect some amendments to this. Look, we all know the first piece of time the legislation comes out, it's not what the final product's going to look like. And I agree. Look, I have wrestled with solar on farm ground. I come from a rural area, right? If somebody's going to cover my 800 acres I hunt on with glass, that's pretty tough for me. And I'm seeing it now in North Carolina. I just lost a big farm that I hunted on. But who am I to tell the guy he can't put it on there? So I think there's a spot to land the plane here. Representative Friel made a good point. We have building and construction codes. Maybe what we should have said instead of mandating it is maybe we incentivize it. Maybe we look at ways to say, if this is all the more cost, then this can be what we can do right now with PPAs to put this on your roof and show that positive ROI. Because I agree with you, Representative Barton. I'm a numbers guy too. And I spent 20 years before I was in this role making money. And I would not take a job if I knew my margins weren't there. And I think what this really comes down to in the warehousing space is there's times when you drive out 78, we've seen them overbuild. And we know that those warehouses are only leased at maybe 50% right now. This could be a way for that developer, if we get a piece of legislation that incentivizes it, say, the ROI is there if I do a power purchase agreement, I put it on until I get 100% lease space. But, I've committed to every one of you in this room to working with you, getting a piece of legislation across the finish line. I don't expect what's on this piece of paper to look like it's going to be when it ends. But I do think we can land this plane. And what I do know is I know that right now for 25, 26, and 27, Pennsylvania is okay with energy. But come 2028, and you have all said in those hearings with PJM and heard them say that. So it would behoove us to figure out a way to get some additional electrons onto the grid over the next 1.5 to 2 years, all right? And I know Representative Kephart and I have had many conversations about this in energy. And there's many times that him and I are about as far apart on the spectrum as you can get. But we also understand we need the electrons at the end. I think that's a fair statement. Would you say that, Representative Kephart? Right. And I just look at a piece of legislation like this saying it's rapidly deployable. I have developers that have the panels. All right. We're not waiting on buying, purchasing. They're sitting here ready to go. And I want to figure out what do we got to do to get them on the roofs, make some money for our developers, and get some more electrons on this grid.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Baer. I do want to squeeze in one final member question. And first I want to say, note that joining us in person are Representatives Kephart, Rusnak, and Inglis, just for the record. But the final question will come from Representative Pielli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the testifiers. I just wanted to emphasize what Mr. Baer was saying, and also what Representative Friel was saying regarding incentivize. And I've been hearing a lot about government mandates. It does work both ways. It's a double-edged sword. There are many townships out there, in Pennsylvania that are creating ordinances that would preclude that farmer who's struggling on his own land, wanting to have the solar on his land, and he cannot have that because for some reason solar is just looked upon as very bad. So the government mandates may not be coming from the state, but they're definitely coming from some areas locally to incentivize. I think that's very important. And I've been hearing about the gas industry and how we're kind of strangling the gas industry. This year is another banner year for the gas industry, much like 2022. We're only number 2 behind Texas in natural gas production. In 2022, we were like 2 percentage points behind Texas. Texas, conservative Texas, pro-business Texas, which, by the way, is number 1 and 2 in wind and solar, has a healthy tax, an impact fee, not an impact fee, a severance tax. They pulled in that year something like $4 billion in revenue. We were only 2% behind. We pulled in $240 million in revenue. Now, if we want to talk about incentivizing an industry, giving something to an industry, I can't think of a better gift. I would love to see those incentives applied to wind, to solar, to battery, to nuclear, to the rest. So let's be fair, let's be realistic. Let's look at this again, not as an either or, but an all of the above, and move forward. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing as it is 11:59, I know we could go on, but I'd like to wrap it up so we can get upstairs. Thank you all to our testifiers and members. Chairman Causer, any closing comments?
I'd just like to also thank our testifiers very much. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned at 12 o'clock. Thank you.